In the study of archaeology, we take a slice or a strata of soil, and what we do is we learn what happened in the environment to create that section of soil. If we hit oil, we ascertain that plant matter was compressed at great density thousands of years ago and led to crude oil, much like plants being crushed at high intensity today, leading to olive oil or something like that. And we learn from the piece, we learn from the individual, from the matter, about the ecology. Because no scientist in their right mind looks at a piece of soil, a fossil, a certain type of rock, a piece of iron ore, crude oil, a layer, a pocket of oil, and says, this came out of nowhere for no particular reason and has absolutely nothing to do with its environment. And it remains to the cult or the cultural influence of human paradigms to distort that view when it comes to human beings. Because while no geologists or soil specialists in their right mind would say that this sand just felt like being sand. In fact, while no gardener in their right mind will say that the rose that died in the barren, dry soil in the dark did so because they felt like it, did so because they were a good rose or a bad rose. Parents managed to overlay in the context of a psychologically illiterate, parentally illiterate, emotionally illiterate, traumatically illiterate cult. Parents do manage to overlay and create the fairy tale, the tale of something coming out of nothing for no particular reason, to dissociate the individual and its personas from the environment around it. Now, if we look at a pattern of soil, what makes a piece of rock igneous rock, or what makes a piece of a strata of the soil clay shale, or shale with loam, or any of the literally millions of fine distinctions that can be made in soil. And in order to tell that story, we need one time. We need to understand the process of time, the environmental influence, what pressure is put on that. For example, if we look at the rounded rocks in a desert, we understand that there's a certain amount of sand particulate matter in the air when the wind is above, let's say, 15 miles per hour. That there's a certain amount of sand blasting going on, that at 15 or more miles per hour, there are certain places where the sand gets lifted up, maybe in a funnel that 15 miles per hour is accelerated in that funnel into 30 or 40 miles per hour. And at that force, it overcomes gravity, and sand gets lifted into the air. And that sand is then propelled at a speed of 30 miles per hour for a period of time. And some of that sand hits sharp projectiles of rock that had split in half, perhaps, in an earthquake or with contact with another rock. And over 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 5 million years, that 0.02% of sand in the air, hitting at 30 miles an hour, slowly rounds the rock. And so there's pressure on the object. And in this case, the pressure is from solar radiation, from wind speed. And of course, the rock is also hit with the projectile of water falling from above, sometimes the projectile of hail falling from above, blown by the wind. And so if we truly understand the object, we can understand the ecology over time. And if we truly understand the ecology over time, we understand that there is not a difference between an object that has been in an ecology over time and the ecology that exists over time out of which that object emerges. In other words, a true scientist has a difficult time dissociating an object in an ecology from the ecology that gives birth to, that relates to, that influences that object. The ecology is the object as a probability field. Because reality, if you take that 15 mile per hour wind accelerated in areas to 30 or 40 miles an hour, other times getting as high as 90 miles per hour, if you take the increase and decrease in temperature, if you take the relative density of sand, etc., in the stones that was formed over millions of years, you will have a probability field. Stone that is of this density will erode at this speed. Stone that is of a harder density will erode slower to the degree that it is harder, all things being equal, but will erode faster to the degree that it is in a wind funnel, will erode even faster if there's a higher percentage of sand. So all of these things are connected. And it takes a great effort. It takes a great degree of dissociation from science. Science is a story of relationships that allows us to predict, through a deep understanding of relationships, what would happen if we simulate or recreate certain relationships. Science is the study of observation for the purpose of understanding, for the purpose of predicting, for the purpose of causing the desired effect, for the purpose of all human beings to feel sustainably better, to avoid feeling chronically worse. We want to feel better physically, emotionally, sexually, financially, socially, mentally. We want to feel better, and we want to feel sustainably better, and we want to do so in a way that we understand, so that we're not yanked around randomly and in terror of losing that which we create. We want to feel better sustainably, not at another person's whim, but through the mastery of understanding relationships. Because when we understand that the Earth is going around the sun and spinning at a certain space, we can predict when the sun will arrive on the horizon. And the ability to predict that minute when it will arrive on the horizon allows us to make choices that sustainably increase our well-being. As long as the sun's behavior is magical, the sun was in a good mood today, so he didn't hide behind the clouds. I wonder if he's in a good mood today. What does the sun need? A rabbit to be sacrificed? My firstborn child? You know, as long as we're in the domain of whim and magic. The magic of unknown relationships. Then we don't have authority. We can't plan a film shoot to capture the sunrise if we arrive 3 hours after the sun and we have rose and we have no idea when the next sunrise will be. We can just sit around, but we can't have everything ready for the shot. The science of predicting the future leads to power. Power leads to freedom. Freedom leads to power. The power to do what every human being in the history of humanity has longed to do, has desired, to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. Now, we have a conscious agency. We have a conscious agency. And so when it comes to human beings, the relationship, the influence of our environment is, first of all, more complex because rocks don't have feelings so far as we know. Rocks don't have thoughts as far as we know. Rocks do not have cultures or cults. Let's all be part of this cult and do this. Rocks don't appear to have their own volition, their own movement. And so we can tell exactly what went on in the environment from a rock. A rock doesn't lie. Now, animals do have their own volition and appear to have unconscious feelings. They may not have thoughts, but they appear to have unconscious feelings and they appear to have body memories. And so if a dog has been beaten or was traumatized in birth such that they fear authority, if a dog has been beaten and someone comes up to pet the dog, the body of the dog has a memory that associates the proximity of human hands with physical pain. And so when you go to pet a highly abused dog, the dog may bite you or whimper or run away or shake in terror, symptoms of the traumatic protocol in the reptilian brain, fight, flight, or freeze. And so there's memory in a dog. There's a certain kind of memory in trees and plants as well. If you prune a tree, if you top a tree when it's 5 feet tall, it will tend to grow a new top, but you will see the memory, the impact of the cut over time. Now, there have been 10,000 cults or cultures in human history. And one of the things that defines a cult is its self-referential nature. This is the thing we do, and this is the thing we've always done, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it will be, because it's the way it is and the way it was. And that's who we are. And we are that way because we were that way. And we were that way because that's the right way to do things. And all cults or cultures tell their people, we're right. And this is, of course, difficult to stomach in a statistical environment in which anthropologists estimate that there have been 10,000 cultures in human history, each with their own cosmology, language, paradigms, habits, diets. Every single cult has been distinct. 95% of them are extinct. They are no longer on the planet today. And every one of those 95%, every one of those 9,500 cults that are dead, that told their people they had the way, they had the right way, the only way that all intelligent people would think, feel, do, be, purchase, eat. This is the way. They're dead, which means that 95% of all cults in human history were wrong. Meaning, if evolution is the survival of the fittest, if evolution begins with survival, then it's hard to say that your way is the right way, the only way, the best way, number one. When it exists in an environment in which 95% of the cults that have said that to their people have lied. They weren't the right way. They weren't the only way. They weren't the best way, because the best way is not to end up dead. And we are in a cult. And of the less than 500 meaningful cults that remain, meaning cults are dying off at an alarming rate if you value distinct cultures, of the cults that remain, we, of course, are one of them. And we think ours is the right way. Some cults are more about the individual, some cults are more about the family, the community. In China, for example, you will find a deep family, country, national identity. And it's about giving up one's individuality to serve the whole, the collective. In the United States, you have a counterpoint, the obsession with the individual. And in China, if a family member shames another family, causes a problem, embarrasses themselves, it is a reflection on the family. In the United States, if a grown male or female from a given family drinks too much, steals something, breaks a cult taboo in some way, it is the individual that is shamed. You are a loser. It's your fault. It's up to you to figure out this and this and this. It's up to you to win. If you win, it's your success. If you lose, it's your fault. And so you have a continuum of ownership. And of course, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, because individuals have some influence on their lives. And particularly if they have been initiated into adulthood, they have more freedom, power, and individuality and responsibility for their decisions. As long as they remain psychological children or adolescents in a state of sympathy, unconscious yes, and surrender to their cult and family system, or unconscious reactive antipathy, where they just reject and hate and dislike their family or cult system. When you're a yes to something that is, you have very little control. You're not an individual. You're not unique yet. When you're rebelling to whatever is there, again, there's very little uniqueness. Once you get to synergy and synthesis in the adult stage, where you borrow certain parts of your heritage and you reject certain parts of your heritage, and you mix and add new compounds, new patterns of energy that didn't exist before, Now you start to be more responsible because you are able and willing to respond. The adult is the first stage of development, not the grown-up. You can be 50 years old and be a child, unconsciously parroting what your parents said, what your cult believes, what your political party spouts. You can be 80 years old and a rebellious adolescent that no matter who tells you, well, I'm not going to do what you're told, just because you told me to do it, I'm not going to think, I'm not going to feel, I'm not going to look at the probability field, I'm simply going to reject it because I'm an adolescent. And to an adolescent, anyone telling me to do something is bad, is wrong. No one tells me what to do, says the adolescent. Be you 30, 40, 50, 60. An adult, of course, says, if you know what to do better than I do, if what you're suggesting will create more well-being for me and people I care about and my ecology than what I was thinking of doing, then I will, of course, do what you say to do. However, if what I'm suggesting will bring more well-being to me and the ecology and those I care about, then I will do what I wish to do or what this other person wishes to do. And so there's more volition, there's more accountability, there's more responsibility, there's more power, freedom, and ability to act. And in our cult, we have lost initiation. And so a great many of us are floundering in a childlike or an adolescent state. Children and adolescents are entitled because it's healthy and appropriate for children and adolescents to be entitled. But an adult is not entitled. And yet we have so few of them. And again, can you shame or blame an individual in a juvenile cult that lacks initiation for being a juvenile cult member that doesn't know what an adult is? And if you do blame an individual for being childlike, for being juvenile, does it work? Meaning, does it lead to anything good? What I want to look at here is the strata of the psyche. Now, if you study a grain of sand, you learn a great deal about all the grain of sands in existence. If you study a rose, you learn a great deal about all roses. The purpose of studying an individual or a particle is to get a zoom-in view of some of the forces that are in play between that individual and other individuals, between that individual and their environment. And physicists talk about the polarity of energy and matter, of the wave and the particle. And at the core of reality creation, we have the dance between the wave and the particle. That moment before an energy pattern emerges into reality and decides, often based on the observer, will I be a particle, will I be a wave? And if a particle, what kind of particle? So there is this core energy, this source energy, which as it emerges into reality, it has a sex, it has a gender, it has a wave or a particle, a masculine or a feminine expression in the body. But how that shows up, has a tremendous amount to do, particularly in the states of infancy and childhood, has a tremendous amount to do with the container, with the environment, with the family environment, with the cult environment. You can think of the liquidity of essence, the liquidity of essential energy, essential self, as being like epoxy or like water. And it's poured into a vessel of a body, which is poured into a vessel of a container, and it fills out the shape, it fills out the response based on the mold, the family mold, the ego mold, the cult mode, the tradition. It moves into a dynamic. And it does this before language. And the thing about emerging into an identity, and if we think of the identity of a particle of sand, we say that it weighs this amount per inch. It has a gravitational, weight of the weight really is its gravitational pull. The more it is like this, the more gravity pulls on it. And so one could say that the denser the object, the more gravity is fond of it. The more the earth below is saying, come here. And if it's very, very small or very, very, quote, light, the earth isn't so interested in it, and other patterns, other volumes of mass are not as interested in it. And so it's easy for us to play with that part of life, with that part of nature, because the earth is not calling it so strongly. But if we have blocks of lead, it's hard to play with a 10 by 10 by 10 foot block of lead, because the earth is so adamant. Come here, be close. You could say it has nothing to do with the object. It has everything to do with the call of larger bodies of matter. But we could also say it has everything to do with the object, because if the earth only likes certain objects close to it, then to become that object is to become that which the earth desires in its proximity, and the two collide. So, an identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. It's a pattern. And that pattern is induced in its ecology, in its environment. It's induced in its environment in the pursuit of our human needs to develop, to reach our potential, to move towards that innate drive to grace and well-being. I want to survive. I want to feel secure in my survival. I want to experience love and belonging. I want to experience pride, self-esteem. I want to experience this and this. I want to develop my gifts. I want to bring those gifts abundantly into the world and create power and wealth for myself and others. And I want to become part of something bigger than myself. These drives, these human needs, inspired in part by Abraham Maslow, who studied healthy human beings to see if there are innate drives that drive every healthy person towards something, we reach towards these needs. And as we do, we interact with our parents, with our protectors, providers. We interact with the ecology around us. And it's a warmer, colder game. When the parents tighten their eyes at 1 year old when you scream or express anger, and then they put you alone in a room, you learn, aha, anger is not welcome in this cult. If I want to survive, I need milk. If I want milk, I need mother. If mother puts me in another room because I'm angry, then I have to turn this energy of anger into something else so that I can survive. It's told in the squint of an eye, in the tone of a voice, and it's told long before language. And before language, we don't know what thinking is, because all language is predicated on thought. We cannot have a self-concept, because in order to have a concept, let alone a self-concept, we need to have language. We need language in order that we can think. You cannot think a single thought without words. An infant doesn't have words. So they're being guided into a form, into an identity, into a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, based on faces and tones and proximity and memory experiences, traumatic events, healing events, environmental stimuli, so that they know who they have to become in order to survive, be secure, meet their human needs. And this is the process that we then wake up and through language discover who we are. Put all of those languages and body symptoms and stimuli into some kind of pattern and words. And so we say, this is me, the I-dentity. The identity, the pattern. Thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing. I do this regularly, so it's a pattern. And because it's a pattern, I recognize it. And because I recognize it regularly, I call it me. And because I call it me, I then dissociate from that which I do not recognize, reassemble, and own and call me.